So welcome to the second episode of Technical Hurting. Today I'm joined with my good friend Adrian Valorovsky. It's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you. I'm on the other side now of the 20s. I hit 26, so I've had a strange day where I was very happy with the food I ate, but in a state of temporary existential dread in my mind. So it was one of those interesting days, but overall, I've had some good food, especially after a rough diet, so I feel fantastic.
Yeah, missing out on the keto now.
Yeah, it's day 2 off, and I think it's going to be a couple more days off it before I go back to being a good keto boy who worships the truth once again.
Today we're going to be doing a preview of Jared Cannonier versus Robert Whittaker, which is the co-main event at UFC 254. Obviously being headlined by Justin Gaethje and Khabib Nurmagomedov. Do you want to start things off quickly? Because you spotted a pattern with Jared Cannonier that I think is going to be fairly important to the fight.
Yeah, so one of the patterns, there are a couple of patterns. I think the best place to start is with his footwork. So I found that Jared Cannonier seems to have like 2 or 3 attack patterns that he always goes to. One of the most common ones is where he's going to stand around, kind of wait until you get into range, and then eventually he starts stepping to his left with maybe double jabs. And once the double jab has landed or gone some kind of reaction, he's going to attack with something from the right side. But it feels to me, Alex, like he isn't confident to attack most of the time if he doesn't do that.
So you think he needs the setup? He can't go from 0 to 60 without the...
I just haven't seen much evidence of it. I think I've seen him also attack on the counter, which is the second pattern. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Go
on. So one of the patterns that I've seen him do quite often as well is where he will attack with, say, a jab or any kind of left-handed pulling attack. And then if he baits any kind of reaction out of the other person, he's simply going to hop back and counter it either with a right hand straight, right hand hook, or a right hand uppercut. That's the other pattern that I've seen that he does fairly consistently. And I'm just wondering, have you seen any of what I've seen? Or do you think I'm seeing things, so to speak?
No, I don't think you're absolutely talking sense. Cannonier has good hard hands, and he's definitely carried down a lot of his power from his days at heavyweight. But he's also, I think, carried down a lot of the hesitancy you see at heavyweight. When you're fighting someone who's 250 pounds, it doesn't matter that you're also 250 pounds. They hit hard, and I think some of his hesitancy, particularly towards the start of a fight, can be a bit too much. Obviously, you see towards the end of a fight, he gets a bit more comfortable. For the last 2 minutes straight against Kutalaba at light heavyweight, he walked him down, hands down, and ate 2 or 3 punches, which was terrifying to watch. But no, I think you're right. He's almost too concerned about setting things up sometimes.
There's a defensive pattern I've seen when Cannonier is getting hit, and he kind of just stops and freezes. He puts up a guard. It's very Overeem-esque. Where if you don't pressure him really, really hard and super, super fast, he will just kind of stand and wait for the storm to finish. And then when there's been 1 second, 2 seconds, then he'll come in and start attacking again. And I noticed that pattern because obviously at a much lower level, but when I'm at the gym, that happens to me. When, for example, when we're sparring, when you start jabbing me and hitting me, probing me with a couple of straights, but it's not too intense where I feel in danger and that I need to hit back, I just get stuck there. And that's something that I've seen Cannonier do, where he has to wait for the other person to stop being offensive and then attack back. So in that way it could be a flaw, of course, because he's being stationary.
But countering that, I guess, where it could work in his favour, Whittaker will throw 5 or 6 punches to the head of an opponent and then kind of stop. He doesn't necessarily exit from throwing combinations as well as he could do.
Yeah, he watches his work sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would too if my work looked like that, but but he'll throw 2 or 3 left hooks and right straight, another left hook again, and then just kind of stop. He did that a lot against Romero in both fights, where Romero just put a high guard up, 8, 4, 5, 6 punches in a row.
Yeah. It was almost like Whittaker started emulating him. in that respect, where he stood in front of him.
I think if that Whittaker shows up again against Cannonier, he could get eaten.
And that's it.
Cannonier moves a lot to the side, mostly to the left, as you said before, set up the right hand, but he will also step backwards with his right foot and out to the right to throw the right hand from the other side as well.
Yeah.
And I think if Whittaker ends up stuck in the mud and having a very high guard and a bouncy front leg, it's going to be a rough night for him.
Yeah.
But if we see the same Whittaker who showed up against Darren Till, very long guard, very long stance, wide legs, it can be interesting. Another thing as well is Whittaker's right hand when Cannonier is moving to the left. We were talking about this before the podcast, where we're trying to measure up the distances and emulate it almost.
Yeah.
With you saying of Cannonier jabbing a couple of times as he moves to the left, and Rob has a lot of counters which involve throwing a right hand very hard, but he throws it almost over the top and forwards.
Yeah.
And just trying to see, I guess, whether those paths line up. If those paths don't line up very well, maybe they cross in a couple of places, but Rob might get a lucky one in there. But if Cannonier's path to the left and Rob's fist from his right hand side line up, there's definitely an opportunity for Rob to land a good few hands there.
Well, if we want to get into the really kind of nerdy technical details that, you know, they might not be huge in the grand scheme of things, but they could be. I think I've seen from Cannonier the ability to, when you come in on a jab, you step forward, you hit, but your foot is loaded so that the moment your strike has landed, as you retract your jab, you hop back a little bit. It's not much, you hop back 6 or 7 steps. Now the thing inches, sorry, not steps. I don't know where that came from. But yeah, he can get back like a good 6-7 inches with that little step, and Whittaker feels threatened pretty. He doesn't need to wait for you to get very close. You can be quite far out of range and he will still perform a head movement or try and counter it. And what inevitably happens is he has to move his waist forward. And when Whittaker is off balance as he strikes, he's quite bad at adjusting it. So when he was chasing Adesanya, for example, there were plenty of times where he could have adjusted the angle of both his lead hook as he was trying to do a stutter stepping jab and hook, but he wasn't putting enough extension on the stutter, so the stutter wasn't convincing to Izzy because you could see that he was just hunting for that same punch. And the same thing happened with his overhand, where for one reason or another he couldn't change the trajectory, he couldn't change the angle, he couldn't change the length of his fist, and that makes it easier for Cannonier to avoid it.
Yeah, if it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Copy and paste overhand. Going off Rob's overhand as well there, there's something which I think has worked against him a couple of times when he needs to get an extra bit of range in.
Yeah.
When he does the switch step through, or when he's leaping forward, he often doesn't plant his foot in front of his weight. Rather, he plants his foot underneath his weight despite moving forward, which not only leaves him slightly off balance, but also removes a good 30-40 centimeters from his range sometimes, which is a huge amount that he's missing out on. And while he doesn't necessarily need all that extra distance, if he was to get an extra 10-15 centimeters out, he's landing a lot more than he's missing. But at the moment, you see a lot of the time where Whittaker does fall short with his long range strikes. And he's not advancing as quickly or as fast as he could be. And I think that initial step being a bit too short is part of that.
Because not only is he losing range, but he's also sinking, and it's that off balancedness, that sense of lost balance, that probably contributes to the fact that he can't adjust the angle of his punches. Now, to flip it on Whittaker's side, I really think for Whittaker it's a lot simpler. If he can read Cannonier's rhythm entry, Cannonier's going to get hit with that right hand. That's at least my bold prediction. So Cannonier's going to have to do a really good job, because I read that footwork pattern within a couple of minutes of watching one of his fights, and then I watched the rest of the fights and saw it. So he's going to have to do a bit more. Yeah,
no, of course. And his timing often doesn't change very much. I know you're a fan of sort of clapping out, but he's a pom guy repeatedly. He doesn't vary his rhythm. He doesn't feint much, or not nearly as much as he should do for someone who's fighting Rob Whittaker, who bites on every feint, it seems, nowadays.
Yeah.
One thing I think is going to be interesting, we've spoken lots about the hands, but the legs and the kicking game are the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
They both throw a lot of leg strikes. Whittaker will throw a lot of those low-line side kicks into the knee, start damaging a lead knee there. Whereas Cannonier will beat you up with thigh kicks a lot before finishing off with his hands. Have you noticed anything with that in particular that's interesting?
Kick-wise, I mean, I think that Rob Whittaker has a really good chance to make an already somewhat predictable Jared Cannonier's footwork patterns even more predictable, because if he can use his low line side kick to the thigh, to the kneecap, wherever, he can force Cannonier to move. He forces him to never be able to plant and calm down, which is something that I think Cannonier needs before he's confident in striking you. He's like a locomotive. He has to choo, speed up, bam, and come to his strike. Sometimes, obviously, he'll get hit and hit back, but when it's not really highly intense, then it doesn't work. So
yeah, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't really thought of that. Most of what I thought of was Rob having limited movement. I haven't seen him check a million leg kicks in the past. He does do it, but I think he can definitely do it some more. I think if Rob doesn't start defending low kicks more than he has done in the past with checking them, Cannonier is going to have a field day with that lead leg sticking out. And I still think that's the best bet for Rob in terms of winning the fight. But he's got to be prepared to either check from that longer stance or to just eat some low kicks and punch over the top. Now, he does counter low kicks with right overhands and also left hand hooks as well. Mm-hmm. He'll throw a left hook when you're coming in with a low kick. He's done that a fair few times. So it'll be interesting to see whether he starts checking, whether he comes in with that shorter stance he has against Romero, or whether he's going to come in with a long stance again and eat a few of them, but then start countering with some hands. We haven't spoken about the ground game at all in the clinch. I'm just becoming conscious of that. We've spoken about the hands now, the legs.
Yeah.
We've gone through all 8 limbs, but 4 really. We haven't mentioned knees really. I don't think they're going to play a huge role. Neither guy's a big knee or a big elbow really. But grappling and in the clinch, they're still haven't been mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, with Cannonier, how much do you have to worry about his punching power up close when he can just, hit once from the weirdest position and end up rocking Whittaker?
He can generate power within sort of 6-7 inches if he needs to, and he'll chain those up as well. He'll throw sort of 2 or 3 of those short punches and starch guys like that.
It's a simple defense to Rob's good grappling, but I wonder how much difference that plays. Rob can be pretty explosive. I don't think Rob will necessarily want to hang out in the clinch against Cannonier. I could see him engaging and then trying to go for a takedown a little bit quickly, even though I think we've had the conversation that I don't think people wrestle enough anymore, which is just
they don't want to get cut by Uncle Dana.
Yeah.
You wrestle too many times in a row and...
They saw the legend of John Fitch.
Scott Coker comes a knocking.
Yeah, Scott Coker will make you a champion.
The only thing there is that I do wonder about Whittaker's ability to keep people down. He's an excellent wrestler in terms of getting a takedown. Obviously, he was representing Australia internationally as just a wrestler, and he's defended takedowns against near enough everyone who's tried to wrestle him.
Yeah.
But he was pretty bad at keeping Darren Till down on the floor when he got him there. Till was sort of not quite just stand up, but fighting for the underhooks and getting his hips out from under Whittaker, was able to escape a couple of times. Jared Cannonier also had some good takedown defense against Branch. It seemed to be very much I'm stronger than you in a lot of ways.
I was about to say I don't mean to be flippant here, but it was David Branch. It's not a like-for-like comparison as far as athleticism goes.
No. But still, Branch wasn't able to hold him down or take his back or really progress with the grappling at all when he tried.
Yeah.
So that this Jared Cannonier does have crazy strength, and that is an unfair advantage. But it still plays a part, even if Whittaker might be a more technical wrestler.
I just there is one sort of esoteric MMA question, which is, do you think Whittaker's become a little less like tactically sound and more kind of Fedor-like, where he just relies on his Sunday punches over and over again? Or is that just because I'm seeing other people exploit some of his weaknesses and make that less effective than it used to be?
I'm trying to think of upcoming Whittaker, because he did rush at people a lot when he was up and coming. He did still blitz guys, he still ran at them with overhands. And I don't think too much has changed really about that. But you say, when you're fighting lower level guys there, the Sunday punches can be, useful and effective, when you're fighting Adesanya, if you're hoping that you knock him out with one big swing, you're in for a rough night, and Rob had a rough night. So I don't know. But perhaps he is in some ways the same fighter he always was, and perhaps he's going back towards that a little bit.
It's just his arsenal was bigger. He used to use more head kicks behind his right hand, for example. He had these crafty setups that he was doing. He was striking like somebody who didn't think he belonged there, and that's why he had to fight in any way possible, which made him more creative. Whereas now,
I think the Adesanya fight was a poor showing for him. Because he was still throwing the head kicks and disguising them in against Romero, but I mean, Romero ate them like Tic Tacs, as the cliche goes. And he was throwing them against Till, but Till's got a really good fade back and to avoid them. He pulls that one face. He pulled that a few times against Wonderboy as well, where he just sort of flies his head back and looks like he's about to have a brown pants night. But he avoids head kicks really well. So I'm not sure how fair it is. I think perhaps against Adesanya, you're right, where he did rely on swinging hands at the man, but perhaps he had seen how Calvin Gastelum had dealt with Adesanya and thought that might have been a blueprint to copy.
He wasn't doing what Gastelum did.
No. Much less volume.
It's one of those how I think my overhands look versus how my overhand really looks. Meme templates.
How do you think your overhands look?
I think that they have a nice 45-degree crease, perfectly lined up, shoulder, in perfect line with my rear foot, both feet evenly spread weight. In reality, I just look like a spaghettified human, stretching in a general direction, hopefully towards the jaw of the opponent. Most of the time a tear.
Fair assessment. I think we're kind of covering most bases. You comfortable enough to make a prediction about this, or if either guy wins, how do they win it?
I think I'm gonna be a little bit ballsy here. I'm going to say Whittaker by unanimous decision.
UD.
Yeah, I think Cannonier will get a little bit gassed, and the right side counters to Cannonier's left side flanks will probably win it. I don't know why I'm saying UD, like Jared's invincible or Rob's invincible, but I think this could possibly be a slightly boring fight, which is a strange take, because if I had this take a few days ago, I'd think it's stupid.
But I mean, they're both hesitant.
Yeah,
they're both hesitant strikers. We've seen it with the Wonderboy Woodley fights. We've seen it with Lewis and Ngannou. When you've got two hesitant guys who hit really hard, they become even more hesitant around each other, and you get really shit fights. So it's possible that it could just be sort of a feint on the outside and three punches around type affair.
Yeah, even if Whittaker is less skittish, like if he's always attacking the same way, Cannonier might be able to defend it a little bit more. And the only thing that does end up working is stopping Cannonier's right side offense, which is so funny, because if you assume that dynamic is fairly accurate, then what you're saying is Cannonier scores when Whittaker tries to come in, and Whittaker scores when Cannonier tries to come in, because they have very samey defenses that don't have any kind of feints built in or anything like that.
Yeah. But what a way to shut down a fight and turn it into absolutely nothing if both guys are great at countering each other. The other thing I can think is if one of them figures out they're stronger in the clinch, it could turn into a Masvidal versus Usman type affair, which would be just as shit, and no one would enjoy watching that. But it's possible it could happen. I think you're right. I think it favours Rob. I don't think massively so. But if you say Cannonier has been knocking guys out, he's got power and he's been improving a lot lately. So I wouldn't want to put money on Rob, or at least not a lot anyway. But yeah, it's been good talking to you, man.
Yeah, good conversation. Finally on microphone. Yeah, thanks very much.
Cheers.